Say we're live. So,
Yeah.
all right, there we are. So glad to have you here. And thank you, obviously, on travels because sales never stops, right? That's kind of the whole point. And so, on today's episode of Commercial Obsession, we're doing a little bit of a different take. We have been talking with commercial strategy leaders with different organizations, and that is only going to be successful when you have leaders of those individual disciplines who are already commercially focused. So I'm so excited to have Gissell join us from Atrium Hospitality. Welcome. And so, Gissell, do you mind just doing a real quick, because I know there's a lot of people that are on here that know you very well, but for those who don't, would you just do just a little quick background on yourself, your hospitality career?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Noelani, for inviting me. This is something that is near and dear to my heart, right? From the beginning, when commercial strategy was born, this is something that I have been very open and curious about. My career has been in sales for the last almost 30 years, and I'm dating myself there. I am currently Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Atrium Hospitality. We own and manage 79 hotels across the United States, but I have gone through all sales positions in hospitality and have always worked and collaborated very closely with revenue management and digital marketing. So very intimate relationships with those partners all my career.
That's actually very impressive because I know sales and revenue, at least, have not had the longest standing reputation of being cohesive. So that's awesome. That's just a trailblazer on its own. One quick note before we jump in, I completely forgot to mention, just for anyone who's joining, please do feel free to go ahead and toss any questions that you have into the comment section. So we'll be chatting for like 15, 20 minutes, kind of see where the conversation goes, and then jump into any of those questions. So please feel free to drop those in. So on that note, so you have been in this space, and specifically in the sales space, since before commercial strategy was even a talking point. Can you talk a little bit about when you started to see that evolution, both in your organization, wherever you were at that time, and in the industry as generally? How did that look? Where were you starting to see those kind of indicators that something different is going on?
Very early in my career, I think it all goes back to good mentors and good leaders. Very early in my career, I started in catering, which, if you talk about, sales and revenue being in different pages, in catering, it's kind of like the last thought, right? It's the one that is supposed to just fill the empty spaces. And I had to learn very early on to profitability and to present my case with how much my piece of business was bringing to the bottom line, so it would be considered above the group, or it would be considered above the transient, whatever it was most profitable for the hotel. So decades ago, I had a leader that had very structured business review, and you had to come to business review very prepared. And I was always very curious of looking smart and presenting with a lot of intel. So my piece of business would be equally considered regardless of the segment that I was bringing to the table. To the point that if someone was presenting a group piece of business and I was presenting a catering, but my catering had $15,000 or $20,000 in room rental, I would calculate how that would flow to the bottom line instead of the group, so I could get my business approved. So it's about curiosity. It's about leadership, challenging people to see beyond their piece of business and look at the overall asset value. So for me, it was very, very early in the career. So
that is really interesting. I'd never really thought about that on the catering side, because you're absolutely right. There is such an innate requirement to understand a revenue piece there. You're not going to really be able to do your job well without. So that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that dynamic before. So as we've gone through and we've seen this evolution, it's being adopted. How are you seeing the sales discipline change, and what the roles are of like the sales manager in general? How are you seeing those kind of shift?
It's funny that you asked that because that is actually my mission. It is something that I have seen in the last decade or two. I have seen revenue management evolve so much, right? And then the emergence of digital marketing with marketing going from print to digital, and then the optimizations of OTAs, and then revenue management with all their optimization systems and yield systems. I feel sales has stayed somewhat stagnant a little bit. I mean, we are still, filling out RFPs and trying to sell, just filling out, inquiries and soliciting. So what I would like to see and what it's now being really promoted is that sales needs to evolve to elevate themselves, to learn the intel, to learn all this system and to think beyond the sales or just beyond making a sales. It's about how is the overall hotel going to benefit. So I think just now we are kind of understanding that revenue management kind of surpassed us, and e-commerce also grew, and sales kind of, if you think about back in the day, sales was leading revenue or reservations and marketing and everything, and now very often you look to revenue management to approve a group rate, right, from a seller. So I think is that well-rounded, that commercial mindset needs to be brought to the forefront of sales, and it has to be at the seller's level, right? If the leader doesn't spend the time with their sellers to, when they lose market share, to sit the team down and help them understand why we lost share. Even though we make gold, even though we sold tons of group, we lost share. Let me explain why. Let me tell you, the market set was able to capitalize more either on transient rate, or they sold better pattern, better rate. If you don't spend that time with the sellers, 10 years from now, we're going to be in the same situation where the vast majority of commercial leaders today are coming through the path of revenue management and analytics and not through sales. And it's because we have lost that a little bit.
That is, so I think that's so interesting. And I love that passion to really help just raise up the new generation in sales to be that mindset, because you're right. I think that and technology's had a huge part in that, and being able to make these other disciplines so analytical, and numbers don't have feelings. So it's so easy to say, like, this is just statistically what's going on. And I was actually just talking with somebody earlier about how, a lot of times sales hasn't even realized how much they actually do know about revenue management. But with sales, instead of revenue, we're time management. Like our revenue is time, and how we're spending our time, where are we going to get the best ROI, and analyzing like how our efforts are going to return, right, the highest amount of revenue. And I love that idea of kind of harnessing that mind and teaching outside of the box, outside of the standard kind of sales. So that's really cool. I was talking with another commercial leader the other day who had talked about a little bit about the difference in like personalities, and that we're seeing in all three disciplines, right? So revenue management, we used to sit in the back room with our Excel sheets. Don't talk to us. They don't even need to be able to communicate.
That has changed though. That has changed, because what I admire the most in revenue management and what that discipline has done to evolve is that they identified their gaps early on. The moment that they got a seat at the table, they said, well, I need to learn how to communicate better. I need to learn how to influence others. I need to learn how to tell a story with numbers. And they have gone out there and seek that training. And it's the same for digital marketing. I mean, before, digital marketing used to be just the creative person that created a lot of pretty flyers and good packages. Now they have learned to be analytical and understand how the trends and those ads, digital ads, work better or not. So it's a matter, I come back to it's all on leadership. If you identify the gaps of your team and then provide the resources for them to grow, you would always have that high performing team. I think in sales, what we need is just to cultivate a little more that, perhaps only doing small exercises and sales meetings every week, and let's have 10 minutes of ownership mindset. Can we, for 10 minutes, think like an owner? And let's see how each one of our decisions impact the bottom line. And maybe start with small things like that so you can grow a generation of sellers that are smart, that are analytical. And then on top of that, we're charming, right? We have great ability to build relationships. We create relationships from anything, from what it started as a business transaction. So without forgetting the traits that makes us great from salesperson, let's cultivate that brain that can get us to be more commercial minded.
And how do we give that to the other disciplines? Because I think each of the disciplines really needs to not be an expert in the other ones, but have harnessed enough of those like strength attributes to be able to relate and understand the challenges and be able to help solve problems. So on the sales side, I can see how growing and understanding on revenue and talking about those pieces. How do you transmit charm? How do you help marketing and revenue kind of take on and understand the sales side so that they can be an equal support to you?
Yes, obviously it's not easy, but it's that effort to filling the gaps from whatever your team has. And I just want to clarify, I didn't self-proclaim I was charming.
Sales is charming. I get it. Yeah.
I meant sales in general, but
you are a little charming. You are.
I tried. But I guess what I would say is, the same way that you try to instill the fundamentals of each discipline to all of the other ones, why don't you do an exercise of what do I wish revenue management know about sales, right? And revenue management, what would you like sales to know about revenue management? And do that exercise, do a team building activity and see, what would you like to know best? Create that environment that there's no such a thing as stupid question, that is totally okay to say, I do not understand. Can you explain to me this again? I've been in the business for 30 years and been exposed tremendously to all three disciplines. However, I am reading the marketing chapters for the new HSMAI sales certification that is coming up, which is actually very unique because it's geared towards overall commercial acumen. And I'm reading the digital marketing chapters and I am saying, wow, I didn't realize I didn't know this much about digital marketing. And it's okay to say that. Yeah. And we need to create an environment in which is safe and you're not going to be judged as, you don't know much, or you cannot do this or cannot do that because you don't have all the information.
That's incredible. And like you said, it all comes down to the leadership, fostering that environment, and to have those team members that you are okay with just going like, this is what keeps me up at night. This is where I struggle to be successful. And that's, I think, such a huge thing and we can all talk about what we do very well and what we bring to the table, right? We can do that, but can we confidently talk about where I lack, where I struggle, where my discipline needs help because we have this space that we don't have the ability to fill right now.
Absolutely. I think that is critical. And that is not only leadership, but then creating that atmosphere. And you can start with yourself, right? If you're the leader, how about you volunteer, you fall on the sword and you are vulnerable and kind of, come clean with the things that you maybe don't understand very well or need more training and more expertise. So that is a safe way of starting.
That is great. So for organizations that do not have a commercial leader,
Mhm.
Anybody can step into that role. The marketing leader, the revenue leader, the sales leader. What does that look like in that first conversation?
I think there's a couple of things that it needs to happen in order for anyone to step into a commercial leadership, position. I think one, you do need to have some fundamentals of each one of the disciplines, enough knowledge that you will learn how to respect and appreciate everyone's contribution, right? If you have enough that you learn how valuable each one of the three disciplines are, and the small things how much impact the overall, then you're good. But at the very end, like in anything, let's not forget that to be a chief commercial officer or a commercial leader, what you need to be first and foremost is a good leader.
Hmm.
Leadership, it's where it's all about. It's about learning and knowing how to manage human capital, how to motivate, how to hold people accountable without bringing them down. I would say that's even more important than the other one that I mentioned first. I mean, a good leader is what's needed to not only be an effective commercial leader, but to be an effective lead of anything, because the rest you can figure it out as you go.
That's significant. And what I heard you say in there too was that aspect of humility. And so you to be confident to lead, but humble in that appreciation for others, knowing that you don't know everything. And yeah, I think leadership training, we've all had those leaders that we remember early on in our career. Like I have in my very first hospitality job, a guy who was over the sales team, and I learned so much about leading from him. And everything I learned was like in a servitude aspect. It was all about how he served those that he oversaw. So I'm loving everything you're saying about this.
I am a passionate person of leadership and emotional intelligence, and all of that. It has served me well. And I am in a position, even till this day, I have been blessed with many mentors, as I mentioned to you, since the days that I was catering manager. But even today, I work from an amazing leader. That leadership style for my boss today, it's about all micro coaching moments, right? It's about the small things that she does that I learn from, and we need to be lifelong learners, and be a sponge of not only when someone sits with you to teach you something, but just by observing and saying, I will learn that. I didn't know how to do that, and look how that person handled this or that, or look how that person presented that business case. So I think that's where it's at for sure.
That's great. That's a great takeaway. So we talked a lot about the good. Let's talk a little bit about the ugly,
Yes.
about because obviously, again, commercial and the entire kind of setup of commercial is not perfect yet. And there's a lot of opportunity to kind of bring things together. So we talked about the vulnerabilities and what keeps you up at night, and where are the pieces that are lacking right now. Talk a little bit about where are the opportunities in the sales discipline to be able to be that fully functioning commercial aspect. Where do we still need to grow as an industry?
I think there has been too many years in which sales was doing their own thing while all the other disciplines were growing. And we are confronted with a generation that is now very used to just go to revenue management for a rate, or go to digital marketing for, just for a flyer. Like I don't think we have that well-rounded concept that we used to have years ago. So the challenge is, how do we inspire this new generation of sellers and young leaders to want to understand the full picture without getting overwhelming? Because also, when we all talk about of removing the silos and all being commercial and all learning everything, let's not forget that that can be overwhelming.
Mhm.
For someone that is just starting, that it's been too few years in the business and it's only used to answering to RFPs and doing site tours, you suddenly need to tell them you need to learn all these other things. It's overwhelming. So finding that way of inspiring them to do it, and finding micro learnings and vignettes of training, and it's the skill that as a leader you need to develop. Because if you suddenly say you need to learn revenue management, you need to learn digital, it's going to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of working with HSMAI advisory board that it's working on the sales leader certification that it's about to be launched. And we worked really hard for the last 18 months trying to create a very commercial acumen related group book and certification. And that is the most complete program that I
Mhm.
think exists. So it's a good start. It
Yeah.
is a good start for leaders out there. If it's not going for the certification because you're not there yet, at least take it as a training opportunity for your sellers, because it has leadership, it has managing the sales function, it has everything from a sales perspective, but it also has fundamentals of revenue management, digital. It has leadership essentials. So it helps you navigate through that. So that's a good start.
And to be able to have, because to your point earlier, the revenue managers had to learn how to communicate, had to learn how to get into that space and do that. Sales, to be able to plead their case with revenue, need to have enough of a base, because they may be absolutely right, but if they're not able to communicate their reason and their logic for wanting to take a group at a certain rate, whatever the case may be,
Exactly.
it's going to be a mess. And so sales, we're supposed to be the best communicators,
Correct.
but without that knowledge base, it's just setting them up. So I think that's really great that evolution is coming to
Absolutely.
equip them with that type of knowledge.
And we have found that small trainings, short trainings in smaller groups, even if you have to do them 10 times, it works best, because then people are more comfortable to raise their hand and say, can you say that again? I didn't get it. Rather that if you are in a room or in a Zoom call with 50 people, you're most likely not to raise your hand. So more effort from the leadership part, but it works best as small groups and small short trainings.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, Giselle, I'm going to go ahead and jump over. We have a few questions that have come in for you.
Sure.
All right. First, we're going to look. So, Jen Official has asked, what advice do you have for revenue managers when they are engaging sales and talking about group or negotiated opportunities, so we do not put them in a defensive position?
That's a great one. I would say first and foremost, do not assume they don't know what they're talking about. Uh, they do not assume that they don't understand the overall piece of business. I would say first, listen to them and ask questions that are sales related. Like, for example, what is the overall worth of that customer? If we take this piece of business that might not be the best pattern or the best for this high demand time, what other opportunities would we might be at risk of losing if we don't bite the bullet on this one? Like, ask sales questions so you give the impression that you care about their role, because that level of respect is what's gonna help you get through that.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Matt Tech asks, Giselle, revenue management has often been a reactive position, coming into play later in the process after sales and marketing have already made their impact on the hotel. How do you envision this role evolving into a more proactive one as commercial strategy becomes more widely adopted?
My favorite question of the all time, because I feel that's one of the biggest opportunities we have
Mhm.
in the partnership of sales and revenue management. I feel that you can help us see the light or see the challenges before they come. And let me explain what I mean by that. Like, for example, If in May last year we booked, a given hotel booked, 1,000 rooms for Q3 for October, for example, and you see that the pipeline, it's not going to happen this year, that means your October that so far has been in good shape, it's about to shift and it's going to be behind pace and in trouble overnight. If you, since revenue management is always deep in the analytics and looking at numbers, if you from the get-go say, hey, May, it's going to impact October because you are not going to have the same performance for October that you had last May for last October, that way we can be proactive and you can serve us that intel. And the partnership, we would always be ahead of the game, and the partnership would grow stronger because you're helping us stay ahead of the game.
I think that this is such a huge question, this ability to be proactive instead of reactive. And it does come across all three, because I think we've all been in that situation where we're pacing behind for next month. Hey, sales, what can you do for me? Nothing now.
Exactly.
That 6 months ago. So nothing now. And marketing, what can you do? Nothing now, because it's time to get campaigns rolling. So sorry, revenue management, just push things out to the OTA at a lower rate and hope for the best.
Exactly. And then it becomes just a rate function. But it goes even deeper than that, because sometimes, for example, Q3, it's been ahead of pace, right? And nobody's really paying attention because it's ahead of pace. But we didn't realize that for 6 months, it's been slowly losing. If we have revenue management or analytics helping us saying, hey, October is still in good shape, but for the last 3 months, you've been losing, revenue because you're not booking at the same pace, we might take action way before and be able to save it. But sometimes we don't have that, that much time on analytics on our side. Revenue, I think that's where you can help us.
That's great. And I think, to the point of the reactive piece, it affects everyone in the long term. It impacts sales. It impacts, your groups that are in-house and all of a sudden discounts are going out. It impacts the front desk even when we start going through that type of scenario. So nobody wants it. But it is a place that I think there's so much opportunity for the teams to be getting together and looking at the information that they all have in their own little silo and being able to show it to each other, to your point, and really being able to see where the different spaces are and diving into it so that we all know what to expect together. It's
yeah, and that starts because I'm blessed that I work for a company that has an amazing commercial leader. So I often joke that we were doing commercial right before commercial became even cool, because since we founded the company almost 9 years ago, we have had a commercial leader, but not every company has one of those, right? So what you need to make sure is that the person that leads every effort, like the sales leader, the revenue leader, marketing leader, they all have a commercial mindset. If you do not have a what's in it for me, but what's in it for the asset from the get-go, you can figure it out. You don't have to have a commercial leader. The three of you can get together and figure it out.
So great. Just a couple more. So Robert Levine says, great content here about growing the organization together to create commercial operations and strategy. Keep up the great work, ladies. Awesome. Todd Ryan, all disciplines would benefit by finding time to look beyond 30, 60, 90 and look at the years ahead more than just during budget season. Amen.
Man,
RevPAR needs to grow 10 to 20% in 3 years. 3% year over year is not going to cut it, even if it's ahead of pace.
Yeah.
Preach
to the choir. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to be able to look beyond that 30, 60, 90, even with the shorter booking window, even with travel being different. It's that whole plan or fail to plan to fail situation.
Exactly.
We can always edit. And the other piece I think is really important, we said, we don't just do it during budget season. We don't just look a year out at budget season. Why would we do that? Once February is over, we can look at February.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. That's great. Well, any last words of wisdom or thoughts on sales and commercial strategy before we go?
Thank you so much, Noelani, for this conversation. I got so excited when I was invited because I think there is a tremendous benefit of having each voice at the table, and for all of us to work together to get that commercial mindset, regardless of what your unique discipline is. So thank you so much for this work you're doing.
You have reinforced it beautifully that this is definitely the direction that we need to be going. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye, everyone.